welcome to In the News for March 6, 2026. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
And this is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Hey, Brett.
Jeff, what a week. Oh, my goodness. My head is still spinning a little bit. What a week. What a week. What a week. Oh, we knew this was going to be quite a week because Apple had not just one product to announce, not two, not three. 7 products got announced, I think, in the space of 3 days, right? Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday of this past week. You, of course, have done a very good job of covering some of this, and we'll get into, we'll walk down the 7 products and then in kind of reverse order, if that's okay, because I think the last one, number 7, is probably the more exciting one, or kind of like the newish kind of exciting one. And then we'll go through sort of the other announcements that were made. So we're going to start off with the MacBook Neo, a brand new Mac laptop. Then there was a new studio display. We'll get into that just a little bit. The MacBook Pro, just minor updates on that. And the MacBook Air, again, just minor updates, mostly just like a processor bump. The new iPad Air, you did a good job covering that this week. And on Monday, just as you suspected, if I'm not mistaken, last Friday, you said there was going to be a new iPhone 17e. And indeed, that is what happened. Let's start with the MacBook Neo. N-E-O. What a neato name for a new MacBook. I've got thoughts on this, but let's walk it down. What are your thoughts on the MacBook Neo, the brand new MacBook Neo?
I have not used myself a Mac laptop since I had an iBook in around the year 2000 or something like that.
Whoa.
So
colorful.
I'm just not. I don't use Mac laptops. And the reason for that is, number one, my firm uses PCs. And so I have got a boring Dell PC. And number two, ever since 2010, I've been such a big iPad user that for my portable computing needs, I'm totally an iPad person. Having said that, I know that laptop computers, the MacBook lines, are Apple's most popular computers, and this is an incredibly important line, and I'm always interested in it. So that's one thought I have coming into that announcement.
Okay,
the second background I have coming into this announcement is that, every year when the iPhone comes out with a new, the new version of the iPhone in the fall, and I always think to myself, gosh, these processors that Apple is making are just so impressive that, I know it's a phone, but this could almost be a computer processor, right? Because they do so much. And so now, for the first time ever, it's not just this theoretical, wow, this is so powerful, it can process a computer. It's like, yeah, that's actually what's going on. So this product, the MacBook Neo, I mean, the key thing of it is the price. That is what it is all about. And I love the analysis by Jason Snell, and I didn't link to it, but John Gruber during Fireball had a similar analysis, which was, years and years and years ago, Steve Jobs was, talking about, why don't you compete? At the time, it was like the netbook market. And, nowadays, sometimes people talk about Chromebooks or these cheap Windows laptops. Like, why doesn't Apple compete at that level? And Steve Jobs, who's, obviously always had the great answer to things, he's like, we don't ship junk. We just don't ship junk. We can't make a computer at that price point that's not a piece of junk. And I'm sure he was right, because if Apple could, they would. But now they figured out how to do it. And the reason they figured out how to do it is, first of all, because they have been making their processors, the A series, the M series, for so many years in-house, that they can make those things, they're just really good at it. And second of all, Apple is just so good at their hardware that they know how to make things, how to make them efficiently, that you put all of that together, and so what they're using is the processor that was used. It's not like, so this year's, the phone that I have and that you have, and all the people that have the orange iPhone Pros, stuff like that, we have the A19 Pro. But a year ago, so they end from 2024 to 2025, and many people are still using these, obviously, because many people hold onto their phones for a couple of years. It was the A18 Pro processor, which is still a super fast processor. And so Apple has these, they know how to make them. They've been making them long enough that they can obviously get some economies of scale and, the efficiencies that come along with that. And it is a seriously decent processor for a computer. The thing that jumps out to me is, people talk, and I'm not an expert on processors, but Apple, you've got like single core processing and multi-core processing. So for some
Right.
tasks, it's just the one main processor doing things sequentially, one after another. And for some tasks, you can divide them out and have different things happening at the same time in parallel, and then they come together at the end. And if you're doing things like, rendering videos and some AI and stuff like that, that multiprocessor stuff can be really helpful and really important.
Sure.
But for most of the things that a lot of us as just regular, Joe Schmo users do, like reading web pages, which is like using JavaScript and pages like that, and, working on documents and, just using your email and stuff like that. It's actually just the single core processor that's the most important. You're not really using multi-core for that. And for this, and as a single core processor, this A18 Pro is great. It's really good.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a really nice processor. This is the reason why when the iPhone came out a year ago, and they did the same thing this year, people compared it to like use these things like Geekbench to compare it against processors used in Macs, and they're like, wow, this thing is like a really good processor. So Apple has got what is a really good processor for 95% of the tasks that people that use a less expensive laptop computer are going to want.
Yeah.
And you sell it for this price of $599, or I mean, this is going to be a huge
Wow.
thing for the education market for students and stuff like that. If you're just going to college and you just want to, take your notes in class and do your work and stuff like that, you can even get it for $499. I mean, come on, $500, not for an old computer, not for a hand-me-down, not for a refurbish, but for a brand new computer. That is just really, really impressive. And you can pay an extra $100, which gets you more storage, 512 versus 256, because 256 gigs is limiting. Don't get me wrong. Having said that, my kids have had, computers with 256, gigs internal drive
Everything's
for a long
in the
time.
cloud.
And it's been fine. Everything's in the cloud, so it's fine. But if you want more with 512, and if you pay $100 more, you also get a model that on the keyboard at the top right, you have the little thumbprint sensor to log in.
Touch ID.
Which, Touch ID, we always know that that's nice. Instead of typing in your password, you can do it. Having said that, in the education market, like when schools buy a whole bunch of these and they just hand them out to students, they actually don't even want that feature because you've got different people log in at a different time. So that's it's actually better for a school environment not to have it. But even aside from schools, just regular Joe consumers, this is a seriously nice computer. It's only got 8 gigs of RAM, which, it's going to be fine for now. It's going to be good enough, but, you're going to feel it if you're doing some really impressive, intensive tasks. But again, I think the target market of these things are just the people that just want a regular computer for regular stuff. I think I mentioned maybe in my post earlier this week,
web surfing, that kind of thing.
We got my wife needed a new computer this past fall, and so we ended up getting her like the other extreme, the MacBook Pro, though not the newer ones today.
Wow.
But the only reason she got a MacBook Pro over a MacBook Air is she really likes having a USB port on both sides just for ease of, I mean, it's a total silly thing. And I'm like, you know what? You use your computer for so long. I think she had her last one for like 10 years. It's like, let's get something that you want that's going to be good.
Right.
But it's way overpowered. She doesn't need all that power. And frankly, a MacBook Neo's power would really be fine for the stuff that she and so many other people are doing. So I will finish up by saying, I think this thing is going to be the best-selling Mac laptop. I think it's going to sell like hotcakes. Because don't get me wrong, a lot of people listening to this podcast will prefer some of the additional power and features that you get with the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro. I understand that. But for most of the general populace who could care less about listening to a technology-focused podcast or reading The Verge or any of those sorts of things, the MacBook Neo is going to be perfect. The price point's going to be attractive. And I think there's going to be all these people out there that they're either replacing an old Mac computer and the price is so attractive, or you know what, Brett? A lot of people out there that are like, they don't even know. It's like, I'm looking at these Windows computers, they're like $500, but these Windows computers are crappy. I mean, the quality of the casing, they sort of creak, and the touchpads don't work. You got to touch one part of it, not the other, and it's got the cruft of Windows and everything else. This is a sleek, nice computer. If you already have an iPhone, it's going to work seamlessly with that. I think this is going to be an amazing bestseller for Apple. And so I'll finish up by saying that although I personally don't use laptops from Apple, but considering how close this, the iPhone, which is so near and dear to my heart, this is just taking an iPhone and turning it into a computer. I'm like, this is fascinating and good on you, Apple. I think they're going to be so happy with themselves for doing this.
I think you pointed out as well that it's $599 starting price, but if you're a student, you can get it for $499. Am I correct in that? With the education discount. I mean, okay, that even is a little bit more mind blowing. When
Yeah,
I first saw this, one of the first things I thought about was the 12-inch MacBook. Do you remember that? Do you remember
I
the
do.
little 12
Hmm.
inch? It was so cute. I think I had one for a little while just because it was, I couldn't help myself. It was just so neat. A lot of people loved that just because it was so small and
Hmm.
compact. But I think that was I mean, it wasn't a MacBook Pro, and I think that was Intel processors, right? At the time, there was no M chip or anything. Certainly, no, I don't know if there was even in the A chips at that time. Maybe there were in the iPhone, but not in a laptop. Second thing I thought of, Chromebooks, the Google
Yeah.
Chromebooks. I mean, we don't hear about those as very much, but when you talk about that education bent, the Chromebooks were supposed to be what everybody was going to go with because everything was in the cloud. They
Hmm.
all, all the schools use Chrome or they use, Google workspaces or the educational workspaces, or all the documents are stored there. Even my daughter in college, that's what they use to collaborate on everything. The third thing I thought of is, wow, there's almost negligible difference now between a MacBook Neo and using an iPad as your full on computer. That's what my wife does.
Hmm.
She doesn't even have a laptop, Jeff. She has been
Yeah.
using
Yeah.
an iPad as basically her computer. But there are still some of those, like I would call them limitations, because maybe one time out of a month, she'd say, Brett, can I use your laptop? I need to log into this website. And for whatever reason, it's not letting me because it's an iPad, or, the app doesn't let me do this. And I've got to go in through a web browser that's on a laptop for whatever reason, or something like that, right? There's some software that has to be run. But now you've basically got, I think, what is an iPad because it's running an A18 chip. If with a keyboard, and it's just in the form of a MacBook. Like, this just is blowing my mind that there's so little difference now, like what you were just starting off with,
Hmm.
between a portable laptop, quote unquote, and even frankly an iPhone slash iPad. Now it's just the
Hmm.
biggest difference there to me is it comes down to the operating system that's running on it.
Yeah. You mentioned the old MacBook that was 12-inch, which I know people love that
Yeah,
because it was so cute. But for a lot of people, it was actually a little, I mean, it was cute because you could carry it around so easily and stuff. But it was
right.
also, that's a very small screen. That was a limiting screen for a lot of things.
That's right.
You know,
Right.
Apple has not, what they have not done with this MacBook is just like make it like a sort of tiny laptop computer. They haven't done that.
Right.
They could have made it a 12-inch screen. They didn't. They made a regular 13-inch screen, which is what most people like to use. They could have made it like so, especially with the A18 processor, and iPhones are so small. They could have made it like a super thin, like the thinnest MacBook ever or something like that. But they didn't
Yeah.
do that. Don't get me wrong. This thing is not beefy. I mean, compared to Windows computers, it's gonna seem very svelte. But it's not the
Right. Right.
smallest
Right.
MacBook. It's just a normal size MacBook. And I think Apple did that for two reasons. First, because at a certain point, to make things even smaller and thinner is more expensive. And they did,
Yes.
they were so their North Star was that price. They wanted this thing $599, which
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
clear, as recently as last week on this podcast, we were reading all the speculations about what this thing may cost. So many people, Brett, thought this was going to be an $800 computer, and they were going to be thrilled with that.
Right.
So to have it be a $600 computer, Apple had to do things to, keep it, they want to make as many as possible. They want to, cut all the things that add any little thing to the price. And so it's not this super thin computer that would have been more expensive to make. It's not a smaller screen. It's the popular screen. Although there are two different models of it, really it's just the internal storage, which is just something you swap out as you're making it, right? And then it's the, which keyboard do you stick in it with the little part for it for the Touch ID. So it's basically the same computer. Now there are different colors, and we should mention that in a second too. But like this is
Yes.
just it's you
Right.
can imagine like the Model T on the production line. These are going to be as easy to produce because they're so similar, and yet they're going to be, really durable. They're going to be the perfect thing that every thing they need. I mean, just to mention the colors, I don't even talk about colors a lot because so much of what I use is just black. But if you want something with fun colors, I've heard people say that the pink
This is it.
especially is really good. And the one that you're showing right there, which is the citrus color, which is sort of like a
Citrus.
lemony, limey sort of
It's
color.
yellow.
It's
Somebody said
definitely
they call
distinctive.
it
Yeah.
citrus, but it's yellow.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a distinctive color that would not be for me. But hey, if you're trying to make a, stand out in the crowd, which some people
Oh,
they want to have
yeah.
stand out like this person in the picture right here, it's
Yeah.
definitely distinctive. And they've got the other colors too. They've got the what is it, like a bluer one and of course the silver if you don't want anything fancy. But I think
Yeah.
people are going to
Yeah.
love this computer. I think they're going to love using it. They're going to love carrying it around. It is It's going to do great, and it's
You
going to
know,
be great for the Apple ecosystem because it's the sort of thing that like you already have an iPhone. Now maybe instead of getting a Windows
yeah,
computer, you're going to have
yeah,
a Mac computer. Maybe
right,
that's all you have in your
right,
ecosystem. I mean, I love the fact that you can get, we'll talk about it in a second, but you can get the cheap new iPhone and the MacBook Neo, together for like the price
right.
of a normal laptop. But like, this is going to bring so many people, especially younger people, into the ecosystem. And you don't have to be young. I mean, this could be, for you, if you don't need anything fancy for your laptop, people are going to actually consider spending, what, for 600 bucks. I may
Yeah.
need a second laptop that I've got my beefy one that I don't want to carry around because it's a little big, and this is going to be the one that's smaller and lighter. They're just going to sell into so many markets.
We can't overlook the colors. I mean, you and I are boring, you know, space gray nerds
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to this. But these colors, Jeff, I mean, they call this blush, which is pink, basically.
Yeah.
This is citrus, which is yellow, or kind of like you said, maybe a little bit more on the lime spectrum. And then you have indigo, which is basically
Mm-hmm.
like a deep blue.
Yeah.
These colors, I think, are going to be so appealing. Like you said, it's going to be the best selling MacBook. And I think these colors, because my kids, they see something like this. Of course, you want something
Mm-hmm.
cute like this, right? You want to make a statement that's different than the silver,
Mm-hmm.
the line of silver laptops that you see all the time. Now you can get it in silver, but who's going to do that? That's so boring.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back to the price quickly, you mentioned you can get a new iPhone and the MacBook Neo for $1,200, which is basically the starting price of like a MacBook Air or a MacBook
Mm-hmm.
Pro. But here's the other way I think about it. This MacBook Neo starts at $599. The new iPhone 17e that we're going to talk about in a moment, $599. The M4 iPad Air that was just announced, $599. So it's almost like you can get a $599 MacBook that's running an A18 chip. You can get a $599 iPhone 17e that's running an A19 chip, right? I think they put the 19 in that one. Or you can pay $599 and get the M4 iPad Air. Now, of course, you get the iPad Air, you got to get a keyboard along with it if you want it to be more of a laptop-esque type of a deal. But that is an interesting take from me, is to see that all of these price points there, because then now you're thinking, well, which platform is going to make the most sense for what I need to do? Now, that's
Right.
nothing new, but at that price point, then you're kind of looking at those different decisions.
Mm-hmm. And Apple historically has been, a premium, nice product that you're going to pay more.
Right.
That's what it has a reputation for, and they've been
Of
very proud
course.
about that. And Apple has continued that in the monitor, which we're going to get to in a few minutes. But at least here for the things that matter the most, now computers, phones, even the iPads. Like you say, you can get nice products, and don't get me wrong, you're missing features by getting the entry level products, and
Right.
many people
Yeah.
are going to
Here's
want to move up for all sorts of different
this
things that you
list.
get. Yeah, that's a nice difference. I mean, don't get me wrong, the 13-inch, is still a fantastic computer, and we'll talk about the new processors and stuff in a second. But just for so many people, this is going to be, this is sufficient. This is what I need. The price is right. This is what I want. It's a brand new computer. It's a Mac. It's quality. It's great. It's great.
We're referencing the list put together by Stephen Hackett at 512 pixels that people have referenced of all of he calls them the technical differences between the MacBook Neo and the MacBook Air. I call them the limitations of the MacBook Neo. But at the end, I think you mentioned this too, he even admits these are probably things that most people buying the Neo are not going to care about too much, right?
They're not.
They're not going to care about the MagSafe, because you mentioned the USB-C ports that are on here. Only one of them is, I mean, first of all, they're not even Thunderbolt, which again, you and I care about, right? But most people may not care about.
Could
One of them is
care
limited in
less.
speeds.
Could care
Yeah,
less.
exactly. Like they may, I don't even know if people would be plugging in an additional monitor, but one of them doesn't support one type of monitor or something like that. So no Thunderbolt support there. Just 16 hours of battery life. Now, to me, that is a plus, right? They say there's 18 hours for the 13-inch, and I think that's just a matter of size. But 16 hours is probably plenty for the type of things that people are going to be doing on the Neo, which is going to be mostly email, working on documents, surfing the web. You're not going to probably be editing a lot of videos and stuff, which is what you would be doing on the MacBook, maybe the Air, definitely the Pro. The screen isn't quite as good. There is a 1080p
let's just say on the
webcam.
screen, it's still
Yes.
way better than the Windows computers.
Oh,
In the
yes.
same. It's not even
Of
in the same
course.
thing. So yes,
Great
it's
point.
not a premium screen, but it is. People are not going to notice the difference. So many people are going to be perfect. They're going to think this is a great screen because you're going to look at it next to an HP and you're going to be like, oh wow, this looks so
Great
much
point.
nicer.
1080p webcam. I'm thrilled that they put that in. I would have bet money for 720, but this webcam doesn't support center stage, which I got to tell you, I don't care. In fact, I get annoyed with people when they have center stage on because the camera like starts moving around all the time. There is good speakers on here. They're on the side, dual mic system. Like here's one of the things I think, to Steven's point, the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack does not have support for high impedance headphones. Like if you have a MacBook Neo, do you even have high impedance headphones? I don't know, maybe. And so anyway, it's just things like that. This is a good list from Stephen Hackett. If you wanted to know what you're not getting, but again, it's almost like, do you care about any of these things? No fast charging, and the Apple on the lid isn't as shiny on the Neo. But that's okay. It's fine. Yeah.
One of the things you mentioned from this list is the USB-C ports. I mean, I think this is actually sort of interesting as a technical standpoint. The iPhone, which is what this processor was made for, only has that one USB-C port at the bottom, right? So when Apple designed this 18 Pro processor, they only had to support one USB-C port, and so they did.
Oh,
but
yeah,
having only a single USB-C port on a computer is limiting because you're going to use one of them for your power, right? And what if you want to plug in a peripheral? So Apple was smartly realized, you know what, we really need to have two USB-C ports on this because there's no MagSafe port for charging. But from a technical standpoint, because this processor was never made to support it, they couldn't do two USB-C ports that support the 3.0 standard, and so which is faster for data transfer, not as fast as Thunderbolt, but faster. And so what they did, and in the conversations that they had with the press this week, they said it was a real technological challenge to even figure out a way to get a second one in there in the first place. But they had to make that second one only 2.0, which is like the old version of USB. So it's a very slow, relatively slow transfer speed. But you know what, Brett? I mean, for most people, if you're just doing power, if you're just like, you're plugging in a printer so you can print something out. I mean, nobody cares when you print out your document. It doesn't matter if it's 2.0 or 3.0, it's going to print the same speed. For most people, I mean, that's the sort of thing that power users are going to want to have super fast ports. They're going to want the Thunderbolt ports, not just 3.0 or 2.0. But for, they managed to overcome the technical limitations of this cheaper but still incredibly powerful processor, and yet come up with the two ports. So impressive.
Yeah, that's really good. What else? Oh, I was just going to point out one of the, I guess it was more of a rumor, but it was a hopeful rumor that if Apple was going to announce a brand new Mac or MacBook, that there was going to be a touch screen involved. That did not happen. I haven't seen a lot of people talk about this, but
makes no sense on an entry-level budget product like this. I mean, that would be a high-end feature first, I'm sure.
So that would have been something like a MacBook Pro. Anyway, I saw some people speculating about that a few weeks ago, and I was just like, well, that would be interesting to see, because a lot of people, in fact, it's funny because when my wife does that scenario that I was talking about before, that she just needs to use my laptop once a month, for something specific. What do you think she does when she opens up my MacBook? She starts touching the screen because that's how she interacts with her iPad. And it's like, if you could give something, in fact, I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and sure enough, somebody had, I think there was an HP laptop that they had, a Windows laptop, and they were both using the trackpad and the keyboard, and they were touching the screen. Like, it is out there, right? That is something that is out there, and people will use it in that way, but that's not something that Apple wanted to announce this time.
One last thing before we move on from this topic is, I just think it's worth spending just 30 seconds talking about the name. Before this week, I thought, because there was the rumors that there was going to be an entry-level product, right? I assumed that they would just call it MacBook, period.
Right.
But instead, they came up with a new name, which is Neo, which, everybody has the picture of the character Neo from the Matrix. But I think, and this is just marketing, but I actually give them a thumbs up on this. And the reason for that is by using a new name and by using the name Neo, which sort of sounds like new or neon or those sorts of things, it gives the impression that, hey, pay attention. This is something different. And I think it's deserved. I think because of the incredible price point, because of what they've done in this thing, because of the processor, I do think that this is a different type. I think it deserves a new name. And I think from a marketing standpoint, it's going to
Yeah.
attract people because they're like, this is something new. So I think, I mean, this is why Apple is a marketing, company, and I am just a lowly attorney. And I don't, I think whoever made that decision of let's come up with a new name and let's choose this one. I think Neo is a great one. I think that that's going to actually help. I think it's going to help sales. I think it's going to help people's perception of the product. I just think it's
Yeah.
a good idea. So, you don't want to be willy-nilly and come up with new names every time you turn around, but this one deserved it. And I say, thumbs up, Apple. Good job.
One last thing quickly I want to return to, guys. I just thought about this. You barely mentioned this, and I know that they feature it on here. And in the video for the MacBook Neo, they featured it. Most people that are doing this, for example, even my kids, they have iPhones. And if you want a less expensive laptop to go with that, typically you've been going towards a computer. But that means you don't get to enjoy the continuity features with an
Right.
iPhone and a Mac. And I got to tell you, I use that every single day. And I know in the video for the MacBook Neo, Jeff, they had to where people would copy something just like I'm showing on the screen right here on the iPhone. You copy a picture, you copy some text, and immediately that is available now to paste into a document on your MacBook Neo.
So
And from a
useful.
school perspective, the fact that Apple featured that is excellent. The fact that I use it all the time because I have a MacBook Pro, and when I see somebody with a Windows computer and an iPhone, you don't get any of that, right? And the fact that you could be utilizing that component and that it works together, I predict that that's going to be a bigger thing. And some people have been talking about it, but just having that capability to access the continuity features is huge too.
I wish I had that just yesterday. I mean, literally yesterday afternoon, I was typing something on my computer. I'm looking at my iPad screen where I had like a contract. I was copying a clause from a contract. I wanted to paste
Oh
it into a
yeah.
Word document computer. And I'm like, I can't just copy and paste. I had to like copy it, email it to myself. How backwards is that? Wait for the email to show up
You
in
fax
my
it to
same
yourself?
account
Okay.
and then
Yeah.
copy it from the email. I'm like, this would be so much easier with the Mac. I could just copy it and paste it. So I agree.
Okay, one last thing, I promise. Because this MacBook Neo was announced at a live event, right? Most of the people that we know, the journalists that we follow in the US, were in New York. And I think even, or maybe it was MG Siegler here or John Gruber was talking about like there was a few hundred journalists or a couple of hundred people that were in the room, right? And at the end of this article from MG Siegler, he pointed something out that it wasn't Tim Cook on the stage in this live presentation. It was John Ternus. And he just has this last little paragraph where MG Siegler is talking about, is this sort of, maybe the beginning of the switch? You and I have talked about this several times, Jeff, that John Ternus could be in the wings, right, for the next leader of Apple.
Sounds
And the
like it.
fact
Sounds
that
like it.
he was out there presenting a brand new product for Apple, and John Ternus and Tim Cook was nowhere. I mean, I don't think he was even in New York. I don't know. He definitely wasn't on stage. Just thought that was an interesting perspective there too. Let's move on. I knew we were going to spend a lot of time on the Neo. We won't spend a lot of time on these others. New studio displays. Now, you have a studio display, correct, Jeff? You've had it for a couple of years because you paired it with your Mac Mini. So, correct. How interested were you in seeing these new studio displays from Apple?
I am so impressed that Apple had so many engineers figuring out how to make this MacBook Neo so inexpensive. And all of those price-conscious employees had nothing to do with the studio display because this thing
said. That's good.
I am surprised at this product, to say the least.
Wow.
Look,
yeah.
I like my studio display. It is a beautiful display. It looks very nice. I'm very happy with it. Even at the time that I bought it, for $1,600, I knew that I could get a cheaper display from other companies, but it wouldn't have been as nice. It would have had some compromises. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to pay a couple $100 more. I'm going to enjoy this one forever. And I'm going to love my studio display. And I do love my studio display. Don't get me wrong. It's a beautiful thing. But when I have my computer next to my Mac, when my computer next to my iPad Pro, I cannot help but notice that when I'm looking at, for example, a picture that I took with my iPhone, that picture looks beautiful on my iPad Pro because of all of the nits. It's such a bright screen because of the HDR, because, it looks so rich and lifelike. It's fantastic. And when I look at that same picture on my studio display screen, it looks really good, but it doesn't look as good.
But not as good. Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
because the studio
Interesting.
display only goes under 600 nits. It doesn't have that same, HDR, type of brightness. It's just not quite as good. It doesn't have the refresh rate for video, when moving around. It's 60 hertz versus 120 hertz, whereas
Okay.
my iPad's Pro screen is so smooth with 120 hertz. Once you've used
Yeah.
120
So
hertz, when you
good.
go back to 60 hertz, it's like, oh wow, I can
Yeah.
really notice this. I got months ago when I was talking to you because I was using that iPad mini for so long. Yes, the iPad mini screen was small, but like going back to that 60 hertz screen, I'm like, it just hurts my eyes a little bit. So the studio display is not that bad. But again, don't get me wrong, I love my studio display. I'm going to be very happy using it for many years. But I figured that for people that are brand new people, if like today's the day I'm going to buy my first Mac Mini and I need to have a good monitor with it, I just assumed that the new version of the studio display would, first of all, I assumed that it would have 120 hertz or it would have more nits and one of those sorts of things. No, it's all exactly the same as what I have. And my second
Really?
assumption would have been, okay, well, that's fine. If you're going to keep all those things the same, well, then how about instead of selling it for $1,600, you become more price competitive
Pot it
and
down,
sell
right?
it for $1,000 or $1,200, something like that. And Apple said,
Nope.
nope, we're happy to keep on charging the same price for it. Now, it's not like they made no changes. They did make some very minor changes. I
Minor.
mean, the biggest one is the webcam, because the webcam on the studio display has always been just sort of whatever. Whenever I need to use my Mac to do a video conference, I just use an external camera because it's so much better. And you can buy those for
Really?
so cheap.
Wow.
So I don't even use
Okay.
the built-in one unless I have to in a pinch. But like I just get better quality with an external camera. And so now it's got a better camera. So if that matters to you, I guess that's nice. And then it's got some updates to the port, Thunderbolt 5 and some things in the ports. And it's got a slightly better speaker system. I really don't use, I mean, I do listen to things, but I don't, it's not like I watch movies on my studio display or something like that. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. Those are all nice little upgrades. And so if you're on the market, it's better today than it was yesterday, which is great.
Okay.
But I certainly have no, I mean, I probably wouldn't have upgraded anyway, but I certainly have no desire to upgrade. I'm just surprised. I really thought that the screen would be nicer or the screen would be the same and they would make it cheaper, and they didn't do that. So, whatever. This is more of the Apple, like we were just talking about a few minutes ago, that people assume. It's a nice product, it's a
It ain't
premium
junk.
product, but you're paying more than you would pay for something from another manufacturer just because it's going to be nicer, even though if you just compare technical specs, you're like, well, why am I paying an extra $400 or $500 for this? So I will say that about it. But
But Jeff,
whatever. It is what it is.
there's a better screen option
Yeah.
that you can get now.
So what Apple used to do is many, many years ago, they had their XDR display, which was, was
Right.
32 inches instead of 27 inches. And it was like the very best of the best in terms of HDR and everything else. So Apple is no longer selling that. In fact, they're no longer selling a 32-inch monitor at all. What they did is they took that XDR name and they now have a new product called the Studio Display XDR, which is 27
Mm-hmm.
inches. So it's the same, size as the studio
Okay.
display that I have. It just has some of this technology that I thought that we would get, like the 120 hertz and the HDR. This is the beautiful screen that is a corollary to my beautiful iPad Pro screen.
Okay.
So
All right.
I could get that beautiful iPad Pro screen on a 27-inch screen,
You
but
could.
it would cost me $3,300. And 3,300
But
bucks is a lot of money.
but it used to cost you 5,000.
Yeah, but it used to be a bigger screen for 5,000. Now, I would argue too
Right.
big. I mean, a 32-inch screen for me, that's just crazy pants. That's to me, you'd have to like how many times you have to move your hand to get your cursor from one end of the screen to the other. But if you wanted the big screen, if you were like a movie producer, maybe you do want that big screen.
Right.
So,
Yes.
I mean, I do think that this is again, this is the typical Apple thing. If you ignore the price, oh my God, this is the best monitor ever, right? This is so nice. In fact, it's so good
Right.
that scroll down a little bit what you were just showing in that screen before, Brett.
Yeah.
One of the things that this screen is so good for, a little bit more until you get to those images, that
Oh, yeah.
this is actually certified that if
That's
you
true.
are, what is it, like certain types of doctors that need to have, I'm looking at radiologists that you
Yep.
have to have like a incredibly super high quality display so that you can interpret the results of the radiology and stuff
Right.
like that.
Right.
Typically, they will spend $10,000 to $20,000 or $5,000 to $10,000 in those
Correct.
ridiculous displays. And Apple is saying, you know what? This XDR is actually good enough for that. So if I'm a radiologist and I have my own radiologist practice, instead of
Boom.
spending $10,000, I can now spend $3,300. So that is the one person in the world for whom this is a bargain. But for everybody else, this is just, it's the nicest display. I mean, this thing is beautiful. And, hey, if you find some extra money under your couch cushions and you like, you know what? I'm going to have this display for the next 10 years. And I want something that is, because I'm going to probably have multiple computers with it, and if you can splurge and get it, I say good for you, because this display is going to be beautiful. This is the display that I lust after. Don't get me wrong. It would be wonderful to have it at home, but do I need it? Do the pictures of my kids from their birthday party need to be that good on a huge screen? I mean, whatever. But I mean, this is a beautiful display, and if you can afford to pay for it, it's just like, capacity. If you can get a new Mac Mini and you can pay the ridiculous price for like 8 terabytes of storage and the internal SSD, you're going to love it, but you're going to pay through the nose for it. And so if you can stomach the price, the Studio Display XDR is amazing, but it's a pretty penny at $3,300.
Walking down the products, we did the MacBook Neo. We've got the updated Studio Display, the new Studio Display XDR. We're going to skip now and go to the iPad, but we're going to talk about, there were 2 others. Number 4 and 3 were the MacBook Pro with an M5 and the MacBook Air with an M5. So those were just some minor bumps, I think, on the processor side. I don't know, was there anything else new in those?
No,
for this,
but I will
week?
say this. I mean, those we had the M5 processor in the past. Now we have the M5 Pro and the M5 Max. They are, I mean, like you say, they're speed bumps.
That's
Fine.
right. That's right.
But they're actually really good speed bumps, because sometimes when Apple does those, when Apple moves from processor family to the next generation of processor family, some improvements are more impressive than others. And from the initial tests, and these are just getting in people's hands, so don't get me wrong, we're going to have a lot more testing coming out in the next week or two. But the initial tests are like, this one's actually like a really good bump. Like this is an impressive. So if you're the type of person, and again, I really think you have to be like a video professional or someone that's doing AI with their computer. But like if having the best and the newest processor really matters to you, these are very impressive. And I'm not going to do it justice to describe it, but I've read enough to know that there's a reason it's better. It's not just that it's newer, so the new thing's always better, but like Apple is like, they're fusing together different chips to take advantage to perform, they're getting like next level performance, so much so that they had to come up with a new marketing name. And it used to be that they would say that their chips have an efficiency core and a performance core. Now they're saying they have a performance core, and I think it's called a super core or something like that. So it's even new names, which I know names are just marketing, but it's this, if you really need that incredibly powerful MacBook Pro, you're going to be really happy, because the M5 Pro and especially the M5 Max, they're going to be super impressive. Now, again, if you just want to do the single, not the multi-core processing, but the single core processing, well, then, they're still going to be nicer, but it's not as impressive. But for some people, this is, so again, you're right. It is just a speed bump, but I will say for the people that care about speed bumps, they're happier this year than a typical year.
Can I also point out that in doing this, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Apple raised the price just a little bit for the MacBook Pro and the MacBook Air. I want to say the Air was like $100.
The Air is $100 more,
And then I think the MacBook Pro starts at maybe $400 more.
I actually think it might stay the same, but anyway, I think the MacBook Pro stays the same, but the MacBook Air is more expensive. But anyway.
I've just pointed out, like, maybe the price point for the Neo is a little bit more attractive because they raised the price a little bit for the MacBook Air, the MacBook Pro. I mean, now, to be fair, those prices I don't think have really changed very much over the last several, when I've been purchasing my laptops, when I would have to say it's been pretty fair. So to me, just having a little bit of an extra bump isn't that bad of news.
And in fact, since we're talking about prices, we should talk about the elephant in the room. The market has been talking about for the last, how many months, that memory prices are so much more expensive. The price of RAM has gone up substantially. And so many people going into this week were saying that because memory is more expensive, Apple's going to have to raise prices across the board because memory is more expensive. And when you know how you configure a Mac and you say, I want to go from like 16 to 32 gigs and stuff like that, people assumed that those upgrades in memory would become more expensive this year than they were last year because of the memory prices. And you know what? They're not. They're not. And how did Apple do something that nobody else in the industry can do? And the answer to that is, number one, Apple enters into these very, very long-term contracts. They go into the people that make memory and they say, we're going to buy all your memory for the next 2 years, and this is what we're going to pay. And last year, you know, for many years now, Apple memory has been a little bit more expensive than you could get on the open market. But because of that, I feel like Apple has the buffer that this year, when everybody else is paying more for memory, Apple can continue at the same price. So it's sort of like, you know, people that use these things for utility service. You know, you're going to pay the energy company, you know, a more steady price month to month. And even though some months you use more energy and some months you use less, it's a similar thing. You know, there are some years that Apple memory seems expensive compared to its competitors. But this year, it's like, oh, wow, they're not changing their prices, even though everybody else is charging more. That's impressive. So
let's move to the iPad Air. So the iPad Air, which has been around for a while, got a bump for the M4 processor. And as you, I think, point out nicely in the review that you wrote this week, the iPad Air fits nicely right in the middle of what people would probably, well, specifically you're writing about why lawyers will love the new iPad Air, but I think your rundown here can apply to just about anybody.
Yeah, here's the thing. Just in terms of year-to-year changes, I do think it's fair to say this is just a speed bump, right? You know, they went from the M3 to the M4. The M4 is going to be a little bit better and a whole bunch of tasks, blah, blah, blah. The point of my my review, the point of my interpretation of this is let's not necessarily focus on the year-to-year change, because most people are getting an iPad. Most people that I talk to are not getting an iPad because, hey, there's something new out and I want the latest and greatest. I'm one of those people, right? I think most people are just like, I've had an iPad for a long time and it's getting old and now I need to upgrade, right? I've never had an iPad and I want to start. And so where do I go? And so this is sort of where they come from. And I just want to use this as an opportunity to sing the praises of, number one, the iPad in general, and number two, the iPad Air. Because you talked about before when we were talking about the MacBook Neo that you said that your wife uses an iPad as her computer basically, but there are some things that you need a computer for. And I do agree with that. There are some small tasks that it's easier to get them done on a computer. I do that all the time. But I actually feel that the iPad as a product, which has been around for, you know, almost 16 years now, is just so fantastic. Let's not lose sight of that. If you want a really nice screen just to hold in your hands and watch a movie, the iPad is fantastic.
That's true.
If you want a screen that you can interact with that you can touch, the iPad is fantastic. If you want to attach an external keyboard and use it like type messages and type documents like you would use your computer, the iPad is fantastic. If you want no keyboard at all, but you just want something to sit there and read your documents and use an Apple Pencil, and I can annotate my briefs and highlight cases I download and things like that, it's fantastic. If I want to work with pictures and I want to edit them, as I was doing some of this earlier this week, you know, I had some old pictures that I scanned and I want to sort of, you know, you get scans, you got little dust and scratch and stuff like that. I don't want to do that on my computer with a mouse. I want to do it with my finger or with my stylus, and I want to hold it in my hand. It's fantastic. The iPad is that jack of all trades that is, in my mind, so much more versatile than a laptop computer. Yes, there are some specific things that a computer is better for, but the computer can't do any of those things that I just told you about, whereas the iPad can do all of them. So the iPad is so wonderful. And again, for most attorneys and other professionals, you know, it's not like you're just using an iPad. You're going to have your laptop, whether it's a Windows laptop like I have or a Mac laptop, but the iPad is that thing that goes with it that is just so fantastic and so useful. And so I just can't help but sing the praises. And so if you agree with me and you're like, yes, you're right, Jeff, I need to buy my first iPad or I need to upgrade my old iPad, then you get to, well, what should I get? They have the low end iPad, which Apple didn't update this week, and I rarely recommend it anyway because it's got a lot of limitations to it. Although it's perfect for, you know, little kids, stuff like that, and you know, your grandmother. But and then there's the iPad Pro, which I love and you love, which is so fantastic because it's the best possible. And because I'm such an iPad user, I want that premium product. You know, I don't mind paying more for, you know, the Lexus, the BMW, use whatever car analogies you want. But then there's that happy middle, and the iPad Air just sits right there in the middle. It is everything that you really need. Yes, the screen's gonna be better on the Pro, but it's still perfectly fine screen. It's nice. And you know, when we were talking about that MacBook Neo, we're like, you know, for a lot of people, that's gonna be enough, and yet it's still a low-end product. But the iPad Air, it's not that low-end product. It's right there in the happy middle. It's the three little bears. It's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's the just right porridge. This is that fantastic product. And so I love the iPad Air. It's the one that I consistently recommend to attorneys. You know, frankly, any attorney that's going to come to me and ask for advice, and they do it all the time, I'm going to tell them iPad Air, because if you were enough of a power
Really?
user to know that you needed an iPad Pro, you wouldn't be asking me because you would
You
be
wouldn't be
enough of a
coming to ask
techno.
me.
Yeah, you would already know that that's what you want. But by
Right.
definition,
Good
if you
point.
don't know what you want the iPad Air. And you have choices now, right? I mean, this has been true for a couple of years now. You can get the 11-inch, which is the traditional size, or you can get the 13-inch, which I like better because it's for looking at documents and screens and stuff like that.
Right.
But whichever, but it's also bigger. So whichever one you like more. I just love, so this is my soliloquy to the iPad Air. I love it. I'm glad that Apple updates it. I hope they continue to update it every single year so it's a little bit better than it was before. But this is a great iPad, and it gets you into that iPad world that is so wonderful that you can do so many versatile things, whether you're using it as a screen, as a touch screen, as something that you type with, as something that you write with it, for all of the millions of things, as an external monitor for your computer. You know, it's so nice for that. You can have your computer here, but you don't have a second display, but I'm going to use my iPad right next to my computer as a second display and move things back and forth. There are so many things it can do. I love it.
Yeah. So as you said, like I've put up the Apple page here for iPad. So the iPad Pro sits at the top, starts at $999. Although I think I bumped mine up to probably it started about 1,200 with the iPad Pro with the M5, and then there's the iPad Air. It starts at $599, just like we said, with the new M4 that's going to be in there. You can pre-order that now, and then just to wrap that up, the iPad nothing or just the iPad alone starts at $349. That is not what you would probably recommend for a professional, right? That's more
and
educational.
Okay. And I thought Apple was going to update that this week. They actually didn't touch it this week, so maybe they'll do so in the next couple of months. But it's an even less attractive product now since the iPad Air just got a bump and the iPad did not.
Yeah. Okay. And then there is the iPad mini still. We won't talk too much about that, but that did just get a slight bump, which surprisingly to me, not too long ago, but interesting. That's a good segue, though, to the announcement that started it all off this week. On Monday, the iPhone 17e was announced. Now, I thought you did a very good job of predicting this last Friday, Jeff. And I think pretty much everything you said came true. You wrote about it a little bit at the bottom of this post on the new iPad Air. And a lot of other people wrote about it as well. It's good entry level basic model 17e, which I think got MagSafe and a couple of other things too, which is nice.
My favorite analysis of the iPhone 17e was, there's a podcast I listen to. I know you sometimes listen to as well, called Mac Break Weekly, and one of their panelists is Andy Ihnatko. Andy Ihnatko, you know, we always sort of wonder, like, what does the E stand for? What does the S, you know, what is letter? He says, in my mind, Andy says, the iPhone 17e stands for enough. You know, and that, I think that sums it up perfectly. This is the enough. iPhone that has enough. It's got enough.
It's enough.
You know, yes, it's not the latest and greatest. Andy. It's not everything else. It's very similar to what we said on the MacBook Neo, but you know, this has enough, and enough doesn't mean crappy. Because the iPhone 17, you know, it uses the same processor as the iPhone 17 and 17e. This is a brand new iPad, a brand new iPhone. It's got a lot of the bells and whistles. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles, so it doesn't have, you know, the multiple cameras and stuff like that. But like, one of the things that people didn't like about the 16e is that it lacked that MagSafe support, which you and I love so much, because you can like, stick there on your. I'm looking at mine right now. We talked about this when we record. I can see my phone. It's charging. I can see the time. I can see the temperature. I can see the date. You know, it's so nice to have that standby mode. And if you're charging on the go, MagSafe is nice. It used to be that you didn't have that in the entry level 16e. Now you have it in the 17e. So now you have it. In fact, you know, Chance Miller, as you're showing here, says that solves the iPhone 16e's biggest problem. This is, you know, it's not quite as bright as a screen as the other ones. Like I said, it's only got the one camera on it. So, you know, it's not going to be the best. It doesn't have the best selfies. One of the features that the new iPhones have, you know, is I can hold my camera like this in portrait mode, but it can actually take a landscape picture. So if my friends come in with me, I don't take a lot of selfie pictures, but when I do take a selfie picture, the new selfie features on the new 17, 17 Pro, all that 17 Air are all really nice. You don't get that on the 17e. It's just the old style. You know, if you want landscape, you got to turn your hand and things like that. But again, it is enough. And if you just want that basic enough phone, it's now the cheapest one that you can buy. It's really great. It basically comes in black and white. It's got that one color, which is a pink. In fact, if you love pink items, you can get a pink MacBook Pro Neo. I'm sorry, a pink MacBook Neo for $600.
Blush.
And you can get that would be blush, and you can get the pink 17e and they're going to look very nice together, and you're going to be very pretty
go
in
to
pink.
town.
And it's going to be
Pretty
fantastic, and they're
in
going to work
pink.
together. And you have paid, you got two products for the price of one. So it's nice that they have the 17E. This is, again, last year's 16E was a nice entry-level phone. This year, pound for pound, the 17E is actually a better, not just better year over year, because of course they're always better year over year, but it's a better value this year. And it's a nice phone. You're not going to get all the extra features, but if you just want something basic, or if a friend comes to you and say, I'm using an iPhone 10 or an iPhone 12, or I'm using something really old, it doesn't work, the battery life's horrible.
Great upgrade.
I need to get something new, but I don't need anything fancy. I'm not taking tons of crazy pictures or anything like that. I just need a decent iPhone. Get the 17E. They'll be perfectly happy. It's enough.
Honestly,
it's enough.
Like when you're talking, it's enough. I'm thinking maybe a kid going out of grade school, maybe just going into junior high or something. I mean, that is a great base level, fully operational setup there with an iPhone 17E and a MacBook Neo, match the pretty in pink colors. I mean, that's a powerful combination there. Really, really good stuff there.
Yeah.
How about all the other news? Okay, we'll go through this pretty quick, but there are a few other things we wanted to just mention, either because they are helpful, such as this update, or fun. Apple releases iOS 26.3.1. We just talked about 26.3, I feel like, but a 0.1 update was released. Again, it goes very quick. I just did my phone this morning here. I think with just a couple of new features. I think we talked about this with that transfer feature there, right? You can transfer from an iPhone to an Android system. Again, blows my mind that Apple would kind of make that a little bit easier, because they're always talking about people switching to them. But I am happy that Apple at least puts that in. There's a couple of other small bug fixes and improvements too.
Yeah, those were all improvements to 26.3, which itself was not a lot. And 26.3.1 is just some minor bug fixes, some compatibility for some of these new products they announced today, like the new displays and stuff like that.
Right.
So it's just a minor upgrade, but it's all, I'm sure it's got some security stuff in there. So get around to it when you can, don't put it off forever, because we always say you should keep your iPhone updated. But this is just a minor little update, but worth mentioning that folks might see it. So don't be looking for anything major here. It's just a tiny little update.
If you plan to fly United Airlines, make sure you've got your headphones with you. I've been seeing a bunch of headlines about this, and I just want to hug the United Airlines executives, Jeff. This is fantastic. They've actually put this requirement now into their, I think it's like the flight carriage rules, that nobody reads, but you basically sign on to them every time that you buy a ticket. United Airlines policy now says if you are going to listen to something in the plane, you must use headphones, or they could kick you off the plane.
I mean, this is such just simple,
beautiful
politeness and stuff like that. I mean, it's a shame that this needs to be a rule, but I do like it that now when someone's being obnoxious on a plane, and if a flight attendant goes and talks to them, they can actually say, you're actually violating the rules for us, and you need to change that, because let's not be obnoxious to people around you. I mean, I wish we had that I wish United was also running the elevators in my building, because sometimes in the elevator, someone walks in there. I mean, I'm here on the 46th floor, so I got a little bit of a ride, right? And there'll be somebody in the elevator, and they're continuing to watch their YouTube video, like with the speaker on. I'm like, seriously? Seriously, there's other people in here. I mean, you're so much more important than the rest of us that we all have to listen to your video.
I think it needs to go to the bathrooms as well, Jeff. How many times have we walked into a men's room and somebody's sitting in the stall? I know this is TMI, but goodness gracious, people, okay? Like I'm at the point now where if I hear that, or somebody's even talking on the phone on a speakerphone, I just go over and stand next to them and be like, hey, what are we watching? Or I start getting into the conversation, because it is just so rude. So the other thing quickly I wanted to point out here is I think one of the reasons United is doing this, other than, just for basic societal happiness here, is they have been rolling out Starlink on their planes. And I've flown United for a couple of flights that I've had access to that Starlink, Jeff. And I got to tell you, it's fantastic. It truly is fantastic. Like I've been looking forward to this, and it's not on every flight. So on the plane, I always check before I jump on, because once you get on, I log in with you have to log in with in this case, it's the Mileage Plus account. You got to have an account, but it's free and it's completely, it streams stuff. I've been watching YouTube on there. It's great. I don't do any Zoom calls, but it really has been working out fantastic. And that is one of the reasons, because you can stream YouTube. The other side of this is kids, right? To keep the kids happy on the plane. A lot of times, the parents just give them an iPhone or an iPad and they're watching, Bluey or whatever that they're watching, and it's out loud. But have the kids use the headphones. Like, we don't all need to listen to that. And it's just great that they're going to push that. Okay. So you can tell I'm pretty happy about this aspect. Speaking of listening to things, my goodness, I got to dig out my old iPods because they might be worth something these days, Jeff. I feel like I could have predicted that at some point the iPods, not iPhones, the iPods could come back around to be popular again. I mean, it's just like my kids are like, hey, mom and dad, do you have any of those old clothes that you used to wear in the 90s that, were so cool? They're coming back around again, right? And so the idea that this story I found in the New York Times, and I found another story today, I think on Dirt, where the kids today are going and buying iPods and listening to music there for several reasons. Number one, because they can disconnect. And number two, what I've run into, sometimes a streaming service like Spotify or Apple Music, they'll have an album and then they take it away. And like, you can't listen to it anymore unless you have the old CD that you've ripped and put on your iPod.
It's just so funny reading this article about, the kids saying things like, "Oh, it's so cool." Like you rip an album and you put the album on the iPad. I'm like, yeah, that's how we used to do it.
We've been there.
We know that. We've been there, done that. But it is fun. I mean, it's there's something to it. I mean, it's just a music device. And so it's not going to be distracted by it's not being interrupted by your text messages and beeping every time you get a Snapchat or whatever else that the kids are doing today. But so I mean, it's funny that everything old is new again, and the iPod is now once again having a bit of a resurgence. I personally haven't seen one in real life, but that's probably because I am not hanging out in the areas where these teenagers that are interviewed in this New York Times article are hanging out.
Right.
And they are happy. I remember years ago, I pulled out my old iPod with the video screen because I was connecting it to a Bluetooth device, and it ended up dying. And even though I never used it anymore, I was sort of sad because it's like, that was my iPod. I really loved it for so long. But I had the one that had the hard drive and stuff like that. If you've got the ones that I'm forgetting the names, the Nanos and stuff like that,
Nano,
with the solid state drives, that those things are probably, I mean, it's interesting that something that was done 20, 25 years ago is still working today and people are still loving it. So it's fun.
I remember that skit on Saturday Night Live a long time ago. Somebody was impersonating Steve Jobs. You know what I'm talking about, right? It's like they had the Nano, and then he's like the Pequeño, and I forget the Micro, and he pulled out and he held it up to the camera like that. Like, you can't even see it, and it holds 1,000 songs. It's great. The other thing, quickly, I love this in this New York Times story. There's a picture of one of these young ladies, students, with a stack of CDs because she's ripping them. And I noticed down here, just because I'm a nerd about this, she's got an Apple Watch on. So I hope somebody tells her, like, you can't connect that Apple Watch to your iPod. It doesn't work. Because, when I'm out walking, even if I have my iPhone with me, I will control my music from my Apple Watch. Like, I love that both in the Apple Music or the app or Spotify, I can control the music on my Apple Watch. And I just hope that, she understands, hey, these can't connect. There's no Bluetooth in an iPod. It ain't going to work on that.
A few months ago, my father unfortunately passed away, which was very sad. But when we had the funeral service, we wanted to play a song that he wanted to have played at the service. And the funeral director said, well, okay, well, you can bring it to me on a CD. And I'm like, okay, a CD, interesting. Really? And so I had to go purchase the song for $1 from the iTunes music store, whatever it's called nowadays. And then I had to burn that song on a CD. And I have, much like in this picture here, this person's holding a stack of empty CDs. I still have some empty CDRs in my house. The last time I've burned a CD, I mean, I don't even want to know what, the Nixon administration. It's been a long time, right? And so I had to how do I do this? And I had to find my old CD burner to pull it out and stuff. And I mean, I did it. It was fine. I burned the CD and I gave it to her, and the funeral director was able to play it. But it's and so it had been a very long time since I burned a CD, and I suspect it will be a very long time again before I have to burn one again. So
okay, so now I have to ask, because you did this on your Mac Mini, right? Which means
I did this on my Mac Mini, so I had to
iTunes software isn't on the Mac anymore. It's all built into the Finder.
Yeah, I say that whatever you can still buy music. I guess it's still through the Apple Music app,
right?
But you can purchase a song. But that's important because an Apple. I mean, I subscribe to Apple Music, but you can't burn songs that you have a
From Apple
subscription to your
Music.
Apple Music. You have to
Right.
quote unquote own the songs. And that's true for a number of things. I mean, there have been times where I have made like a video and Apple will say, like, if you want to be able to render this video so that you can share it with friends and family, you can't embed music from Apple Music or Spotify. You have to
Right.
embed something that you own. And that's been fine because you can buy songs for about $1, sometimes $1.29. And so I'll say, like, that's fine. I mean, I'm happy to spend $1 to get like what I think is the great soundtrack for this. And I purchase it. And then once I own it, then I can use it as the backdrop to my video and stuff like that. So I do purchase songs very occasionally. Do I purchase more than one a calendar year? Probably not. Maybe it's one every 2 years, but I do it occasionally. So purchasing songs was something that I knew you could still do. But reminding myself how to burn a CD, that I had to think about that one. That was interesting, but it still works. I mean, once you plug in an external CD burner drive, if you find one,
it still works.
The Mac still knows how to do that. So.
The last thing quickly, I just realized in this story, I made the comment that iPods don't have Bluetooth, which means they're not going to work with your AirPods. Like every picture in here, yes?
Yeah, unless you plug in one of those AirFly.
Yeah, that's true.
But otherwise, you're right. But I mean, I think 99% of the teens that are using these are just plugging in the old school devices. And there may be something, they probably think it's cool to have like the white earbuds coming out, the white cords coming out of their ears.
This is old school now.
Old school.
Jeff, because it's like, those profiles, right? Like that amazing, advertising campaign that Apple had with like the profiles, but they all had wires, right? Going to the ears.
Yep.
Oh, man. Yep. Everything old is new again. In the know, since we're talking about music, I wanted to provide an Apple Music tip and something that now I probably remember. We may have mentioned this when it came out because I think it's been out for a few years now, but it was amazing to go back and find Music Haptics. And I love this little video here. This is a rapper by the name of Kiddo K, I think, who apparently is hard of hearing. And so he has this little video where he explains this Music Haptics feature, which basically means, as you all know, the iPhone can vibrate. Like if you get a phone call, you can have it vibrate in addition to a ringtone, right? Or maybe just do the vibration so that you feel that somebody's doing it. Or if you get a notification, the iPhone can have a haptic and, give you a little bit notification. I did not know that they built in Music Haptics that you can turn on the iPhone. It's an accessibility feature in your settings. And then as you play certain pieces of music, certain songs, not every song will do this, but there are certain songs in Apple Music that come with haptics. And you can either elect to put a full mix haptic on so that it's not just the vocals, but it's the rhythm and the beat, and the iPhone will vibrate along with that rhythm and the beat. You can also turn on, there's a vocals only so that you can play haptics just for the vocals or vocal-like melodies, which it's a little weird and odd. Just, thankfully, I'm not hard of hearing. I don't have any issues there. So I don't think I fully understand how powerful that this can be for somebody that can just hold an iPhone. Maybe they hear some of the music or some, frequencies of a music, but then they can hear the rhythm and the beat, or they can feel it as well as hear whatever they can hear. That's just amazing. And it's a feature that's hidden. Again, you have to go into your settings, go to accessibility, and you have to turn on Music Haptics. And they even now have an option so where you can do light intensity, medium, or strong haptic feedback. And it's pretty amazing to listen to a song that I know and have almost like a tactile feedback along with the actual sounds. So if you've never looked at this, it's just something kind of interesting and fun to do. There's a little extra button that comes in when you're playing the song in Apple Music that has the haptics feedback, and you can pause the haptics and then you can, elect to turn it back on again. But again, it's not available for all the songs. You have to go in, but here's a link. I'll make sure it's in the show notes here, that if you go here, Apple Music has put together some playlists with songs that actually have the haptics involved. And so if you wanted to test this out, this would be the best place to go.
Huh. I didn't know about the playlist. I'll have to check, because I've never tried. I knew this feature was available, but I never tried it. But if they've got some specific playlists that are, well designed to show it off, I have to check that out. That'll be something fun to do. Thanks.
Worth doing.
Very cool. Okay. So I have another Apple Music tip. and it has
Oh,
to do
good.
with transitions between songs. So you know how
Oh,
sometimes,
yeah.
you might be, listening to the, radio back in the day, you'd have a song sort of transition from one song to another. One would fade out
Right.
and the other one would fade in. And or sometimes if you're in like a venue, they may actually have like a real a DJ right there in the room that is
Yeah,
transition between
DJ.
songs. And so for a long time, the iPhone has had the ability in Apple Music to do a crossfade between one song and another. So instead of a song ending and then sort of having a pause and then the new song begins, which sometimes is what you want, but other times it's sort of nice to go from song to song to song to song. And so crossfade is this thing that's a very simple song translation for a set duration. I forget what it is, like a second or two before the end of the song.
Okay.
One song goes down, the other song goes up. But the problem is that simple crossfade, which is just based upon a number of like seconds or portions of seconds, that might not always be the perfect place to transition a song. And if you're like
Right.
a skilled DJ that knows the music really well, will actually know how to transition from one song to another so that it sort of seems seamless and so that it makes sense. But that requires a lot of expertise and knowledge, or at least it used to. What Apple has come up with, and this is a feature they came up with, I think it's in iOS 26, so it came out last fall,
It is. Yeah.
is they have some very smart engineers that have come up with this thing called AutoMix. And the way that AutoMix works is they use machine learning. It's not generative AI, but it's like, the original version of AI. They use machine learning to analyze every song, every song in Apple Music. And based on that analysis, they know in the song where the beats are. They know where, they
Oh,
understand the phrases of songs, the verses versus the refrains, and they understand the mechanics of music. And what can you do once you have that understanding of music? What are some of the cool things that you can do? Well, one of the cool things that you can do is you can make a more intelligent decision on when one song should fade out at the very end and the next song
oh,
should fade in
okay.
so that it just seems more seamless. And it's the sort of thing that you may not pay attention to unless you're really listening for it. It's more likely to be that if you just use the regular old crossfade, you'll hear a transition between songs and it's like, that wasn't the best transition. Whereas with AutoMix, you're much more likely to just, I guess you're more likely to not notice it, I guess is what I'm really saying. But the reason that you're not noticing it is because it's done so well. And so it's just a really impressive use of the technology to have AutoMix. And don't get me wrong,
Interesting.
sometimes you don't want to have a crossfade or an AutoMix. Sometimes you just want to hear a song till the very end, have a pause and go to the next
Right.
song.
Right.
But then there are other
Right.
times, just depending upon the mood that you're in, you actually might want that crossfade. Just the other day, I was doing some work and I was down in my living room, and I'm reading I'm listening to some audiobooks right now. It's the Harry Bosch series, which are sort of famous, the Harry Bosch books.
Oh,
And
yeah.
in the latest book,
Good
Harry
show too,
Bosch
by the way.
I haven't
Yeah.
watched the show yet. I've just been reading the
Oh,
books.
you're gonna
But
love that.
the Harry Bosch, the character, talks about how he likes listening to this old jazz guy
Jazz.
from the
Yeah. '60s.
It's Art Pepper, and I had never heard of Art Pepper
Oh,
before. So I'm
love
like,
Art Pepper.
okay,
Yes.
so like, I want you to just play some Art Pepper, but it's sort of like, beep boppy and just sort of you transit, it's good.
He's a
But I'm like,
saxophone player.
I
Yeah.
saxophone players like I'm just go from song to song. I basically want to just be I want to have nonstop good jazz saxophone music as I'm sitting here reading my briefs
Yeah.
and annotating it, right? And I don't want to have songs end and begin. I just want to, and so I just, this is what I want. I want AutoMix. I want, not just a crossfade from song to song, but an AutoMix. So there are times, or maybe you're listening to some pop music and this is why DJs do it in like a club, is they want to keep the beat going and keep people
That
going.
same
And so
beat.
they do
Right.
the transitions from one to another. And they even do fancy things like change the speed of music and stuff. But, there are times where it's just nicer. And this is one of those examples of the fit and finish, whether you're talking about Apple hardware or Apple software, that AutoMix is an example of that. And so if that interests you, you can either turn it on in the settings app
Right.
of the app, or what you can do is if you go to that second page the second link that I showed you, Brett, there's
There
actually a
you
little
go.
picture of it there. It's a little icon. I'll try to describe it. That there's the two, if you scroll down a little bit, there's the
Yeah.
the two different pictures that you can use. There's one little icon for crossfade, which has like an arrow sort of going
Oh,
down and another
yeah.
arrow
Here
sort of
you
coming
are.
up, and then
Yeah.
the second icon, which sort of looks like two circles with one of them has a dot in the middle and one's open. That is the auto mix. And so, it's, do you want auto mix on or off? Auto mix and crossfade is an either or, but of course you could have both of them off if you don't want either one of them at all. And so you can decide if you want to have auto mix turned on. So I encourage you to check it out. And although this is beyond my tip today, I will just mention that the same technology that went behind analyzing every single song so that Apple knows the structure of the song and they can do AutoMix in intelligent ways. Apple is actually doing some very interesting other things with that. Just to sort of preview this, I took for Mardi Gras, like I took a bunch of videos of Mardi Gras when I had friends and family in town, right? And oftentimes they were just little 30-second, 40-second video clips. I took, I don't know, 20 of them, right? And so I thought it might be fun to sort of put those together into a little montage. And so I used Final Cut Pro on my iPad. And I, used a feature they have to sort of put together a montage, and then I swapped out some of the clips, stuff like that. But there's a feature in there where you can actually, once you put an underlying song, I put like a Mardi Gras Mambo, which is a famous local song for Mardi Gras music. I put the Mardi Gras Mambo underneath it. But you know how when you transition from like one scene to another, you really want that to happen on the beat of the song because that just feels better. And
absolutely.
The iPad can do that automatically in Final Cut Pro. And the reason it does it is because it actually knows where the beats are, like where the measures. If you ever do like, song music, you have and it actually knows where the beats are. And there's a new feature in there, I forget the name of it, that you can turn on that it actually shows little dots that show you where the beat is. And so like if I'm swapping out a clip or I'm making something shorter or longer, I can actually adjust the clip so that this clip ends. I don't have to even be listening to it. Just visually, I can see from the dot that is where the beat is. And so that's where I want to transition from one clip to another clip. And the end result is you can work a lot faster. Yeah, there you go. Edit to the beat. You're showing it right now. It's called the beat detection.
Beat detection. Yeah.
It's the same underlying technology that allows them to do AutoMix. It also allows this to work. And it's really cool. And if you've never tried to make whether it's slides or video, putting together into a montage that you have like a video, speaking of funerals, you might want to have this as like a day in a life type thing for a funeral, or anytime you want to put stuff together, it's jarring when you transition from picture to picture or from video to video and it's the offbeat, but it's pleasant when they transition right there on the beat. And with this feature, because of Apple using its machine language to understand songs, it's just nicer. It's just more pleasant. So,
awesome.
This is really cool technology. And I'm sure there's going to be other things that Apple's going to enable with this same underlying technology. But like once they do the hard work of figuring out how to underline songs, they can bring us cool features like beat detection, like AutoMix. And it's one of those things that just puts Apple above the rest. It's like they're doing really cool, nice stuff.
That is amazing. You say you can go into the Apple Music app and make these changes, but I got to tell you, while you were talking, I went into the settings. You go to
either way,
and you go to music, but there's a lot of interesting settings that you can customize with some of that there, including obviously the AutoMix and the Crossfade. And so I just would invite anybody to go into those music settings and look at some of the other things that you can do. And I was saying, like, I can make this a little bit more of a customized environment for myself, whether the kind of music that I want to listen to, or anyway, just some good stuff there on this. Some nice Apple Music tips. Well, I think we did justice to all of the 7 announcements that was this week. I knew this was going to be a while because it took a while for Apple to get everything else. I think we're done for a while, though, right?
I hope so.
Do you think we're done now until probably summer for WWDC, right? That would probably be the next time. Yeah, that we'll see some announcements there. But we don't have to wait that long. We'll talk with you next week, Jeff. As always, this was great. Thanks.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.